Hey y'all, it's Devin the Albino Jackass, Old Hickory 2.0, coming at you with a Fallout 4 lore video today. We're going to be talking about the Minutemen. Going to be taking a break from real-world politics and talk about my, not just favorite faction in Fallout 4, but my favorite faction in Fallout in general. That's a pretty hot take, I know. Now, in this video, we're going to be talking about the history of the Minutemen, the lore surrounding them, their accomplishments, and their weaknesses and flaws. So let's go ahead and dive right in with their flaws and weaknesses first. Now, the first and biggest flaw of the Minutemen is probably the most obvious, and that is they have the weakest weapons, armor, and technology in the Commonwealth. Now, that, I think, goes together with the very homespun revolutionary militia nature of the Minutemen. I think these are people who are pretty much grabbing Granddad's shotgun and going out and defending the people of the Commonwealth. Now, for those of you who don't know a lot about the world of Fallout, and Fallout 4 in particular, it is a post-apocalyptic world set in a world which technology evolved along the lines of how the 1950s imagined technology would evolve, vacuum tubes and things like that. Not a lot of transistors and microchips. So that's the world we find ourselves in. Fallout 4 in particular is set in the area of Boston, and that is where the Minutemen get their name. They obviously get their name from the real-world Minutemen of the American Revolution. So with you being caught up there, the Minutemen have the weakest technology, the weakest weapons, especially when you compare them to, say, the Brotherhood of Steel. That is a problem, and I think it segues into the second biggest problem of the Minutemen, and that is the leadership and organization. With the Minutemen being a militia, it is a very ragtag, homespun group. There's not a lot of organization to it, and that is ultimately a problem. Those problems become apparent over the course of the history of the Minutemen as they exist in the world. So let's go ahead and get into the history of the Minutemen. We don't really know how the Minutemen got started. I do have a theory on that, and I'll get to that. But we don't really know for sure. At some point, they began as a militia designed to protect the people of post-apocalyptic Boston, and the idea of the Minutemen is, just like the name would suggest, be ready to fight at a minute's notice to protect the people of the Commonwealth. Big part of why I love them. They are a very libertarian-minded group, it seems, all about letting people just live their lives, run their farms and businesses without any interference, without threat from raiders or mutants and the like. And in the post-apocalyptic world of Fallout, I think that mission is very important. Anyway, back on topic to the history. So, we don't know how the Minutemen began. But we do know that they first rose to prominence when they defended Diamond City, which is a settlement made in the ruins of Fenway Park. They defended Diamond City from a horde of super mutant attackers. Now, notice I said this is when they first rose to prominence. That's not necessarily when the Minutemen started. Excuse me. But also, at some point, the Minutemen fought a successful war against the Institute. Now, we don't know the ins and outs of this. It's only hinted at a couple of lines of dialogue here and there. But we do know that in 2224, I believe, if I have the year right in-game, the castle, the Minuteman headquarters in Fort Independence, in-game it's called the castle, is attacked by a sea monster, basically. And this kills the general of the Minutemen, General McGann. And from this point, the Minutemen begin to weaken until 2287, about 60 years of the Minutemen struggling, getting by, barely hanging on. And over this time, people start to leave. You start to have corruption. You start to have infighting against one settlement's group of Minutemen may not like another settlement's leader, so they won't come and help. You start to have these interior political problems that start to break the Minutemen apart after the destruction of the castle. So, by 2287, there is just one group left, and under the command of a man named Ezra Hollis. And Ezra Hollis is leading a group of Minutemen that includes Preston Garvey, to go and defend the town of Quincy, which is being attacked by a mercenary group called the Gunners. And the Minutemen fail. A traitor in the Minutemen ranks sells out the town, and the Gunners take Quincy and kill all of the remaining Minutemen and the settlers that were in the town that Preston Garvey did not manage to rescue before the fall of Quincy. That is where you find the Minutemen at the beginning of Fallout 4. They are at their lowest point, and you, as the sole survivor, have the opportunity to build them back up. And I usually choose to do so. But that is a lot of the lore we have about the Minutemen. We don't really know a whole lot about the ins and outs. But one of the biggest flaws of the Minutemen, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, was their leadership and organization. The Minutemen were entirely dependent on their general. There was no sort of succession set up in case of a Minuteman, in case of the general's death or what have you. These were elected by the various Minuteman groups from all of the various settlements in and around Boston. And as I mentioned before, the interior politics and infighting among these groups after the death of General Becker in 2283, I believe it's stated in the game. So about 5 years before the sole survivor gets out of Vault 111, the Minutemen basically just fall apart. And we see the shape that the Commonwealth is in when you emerge. It is probably one of the bleakest areas of Fallout, honestly. Even more so than the Capital Wasteland, I think, just given the Institute's nefarious operations within the Commonwealth, shall we say. But the Minutemen are, without a doubt, my favorite faction, precisely because you have the opportunity to take them from where we find them in Fallout 4 and build them into a true military that can defend the burgeoning nation of the Commonwealth. I think the Minutemen are pivotal to the growth of the Commonwealth as a civilization. Now, I had mentioned that the Minutemen have fought a war against the Institute. For those of you who don't know, the Institute are the remains of the Fallout universe's equivalent of MIT. They went underground and they founded a scientific utopia called the Institute. That's a little bit of lore there. Now, the Institute did a lot of nefarious things, kidnapping people for experimentation, that sort of thing, infecting them with the FEV virus, which turns people into super mutants, and releasing them back into the Commonwealth. So the Institute was obviously a very negative force in the Commonwealth, and at some point they fought a war with the Minutemen, and the Minutemen won. We don't know the ins and outs of this, but there are a couple of lines of dialogue that confirm this. I believe that is actually why the Institute has been driven completely underground, is because they lost that war with the Minutemen. It could have been sometime after the massacre of the Commonwealth Provisional Government, which takes place about 100 years before the game. We don't really know. And this goes back to a lot of information is really missing about the Minutemen. We don't know their exact origins, and this is my theory on it, and get ready. I think the Minutemen originated from the survivors of Vault 75. Now, for those of you who don't know what Vault 75 was, it was a vault set up under Malden Middle School, in which the children were taken, put through intensive military training, while their parents were killed. And in this vault, there would be the children who completed the military training successfully. They were the strongest, the fastest. They would have their genes harvested and they would be killed, while the smarter kids would be brought in to be scientists. Now, at some point, the children revolted and escaped the vault. Now, we know that at least 2 generations of children were raised within this vault. And a lot of people think this is where the Gunners come out of. I think maybe, and I'll get into that here in a second, but the Vault 75 children who revolted actually came back in an attempt to save the infants and the younger children in the vault. That doesn't seem like something the Gunners would do, or the people that would become the Gunners would do. Also, when you think about the name Minutemen, this would imply a certain level of education that your average wastelander just wouldn't have. They would have the military training and equipment and know-how necessary to build an effective militia. They would probably be very anti-authoritarian in their mindset, given what they escaped out of. They would most likely be the exact opposite of what Voltec wanted them to be in these experiments. And I think that the survivors of the Volt 75 uprising formed the Minutemen. And the reason I say that is we know at least 2 generations were raised within the Volt. The bombs fell in 2077, so simple math would indicate that the revolt against the scientists would have happened somewhere around 2230. The Minutemen defending Diamond City happened in 2163, 30 years afterward. Now, remember, the defense of Diamond City was how the Minutemen rose to prominence. It's not necessarily how they were founded. To put it like, think of it like a singer who has been singing for a long time, but only recently had their big #1 hit. That would be the Minutemen at Diamond City. They had been around some time before then to be in a position to be able to do that. So that is the main reason why I think the Minutemen were formed by the survivors of Volt 75. You know, if you disagree with that, let me know, but that is my theory. And getting into why the Minutemen are my personal favorite of all the factions in Fallout is not only do you get the chance to build them up and help them form what should have been formed in the Commonwealth a long time ago, but you also get a chance to see the impact that has. You get to build these settlements. You get to create the supply lines and things like that. And the Minutemen, to me, represent the purest ideas of a post-apocalyptic society. Everyone helps each other by their own free will. The Minutemen are an entirely volunteer organization. They defend settlements. They defend people, regardless of if they are non-feral ghouls, as in the case of the settlers at the Slog, whether they are synth, whether they are railroad. It is siding with the Minutemen is the only way you can keep both the railroad and the Brotherhood alive. That, to me, speaks volumes of the character of the Minutemen. That is the biggest reason why I like and actually love the Minutemen, is their willingness to defend the average everyday people of the Commonwealth, regardless of who they are, regardless of their ability to pay, regardless of all of that. If you call for them, they will show up. And in a post-apocalyptic world like we find in Fallout, that's exactly what you need. But, you know, those are my thoughts on the Minutemen as a faction. Now, a couple of things on that. It really is one of the biggest problems with Fallout 4 is the underdevelopment of a lot of these factions. I think the Gunners could have been a lot more compelling than they were. We don't know anything about their motivations, what they're doing. We know they're a mercenary group. That's pretty much all we know about the Gunners. Very, very well, very, very undercooked rivalry they could have had with the Minutemen. It was a real shame that you couldn't go back and reclaim Quincy as a settlement. There were a lot of problems, but overall the mission of the Minutemen and the way the Minutemen go about achieving their goals, I absolutely love. Now, if you really want to buff the Minutemen in game, I recommend mods like Militarized Minutemen or Liberty Reborn, which is what I use. But if we take the Minutemen by the end of the game as you have built them up, I really think I really think that had the game been properly, had enough time to develop, and had Bethesda put more effort into it, you would see the Minutemen equipment improve over the game. You would see in the beginning, yeah, they're carried around pipe pistols and laser muskets, but by the time you storm the Institute, they should be having combat armor and laser rifles. That's just my opinion. I would like to see that. That's why I use Liberty Reborn, but again, the goal of the Minutemen, the way they go about achieving that goal, is just absolutely wonderful. And I gotta say, man, despite all of their flaws, I've said it countless times throughout this video, they're just my favorite faction in Fallout. So I think that's gonna wrap up this video, guys. Be sure to let me know what your thoughts on the Minutemen are down below. Let me know what you thought of the video. Be sure to like, share, subscribe, all that good fun stuff. I've been the Albino Jackass. Thanks for listening to me hee-haw, guys. The next Fallout faction video, we're probably going to be covering the NCR. We gotta cover the equivalent on the West Coast, so do be on the lookout for that. And guys, have a great day.